Hey, Bastich B here for 64K, and today we're going to have a look at the 3 video games that were made for the movie Willow. So without further ado, let's cue that intro. Hey, welcome back. And so what's unique about this series is that it doesn't really happen very often that multiple companies get licenses to a single movie. It used to happen quite often back in the day. It never really happens anymore. There were 2 companies that got the license to the movie Willow. One was Mindscape and the other was Capcom. 3 games were made, 1 by Mindscape and 2 by Capcom. So it's pretty cool that you've got 3 games out of this one movie. If you've never seen Willow, the movie, then you definitely need to see it. It's excellent. It's going to make the game so much better. If you've never seen it at all and never heard of it, then here's a little history on the movie.
Willow was an action fantasy adventure movie released in 1988 from Lucasfilm. Written by George Lucas, it was meant to be a start of a new franchise, but never managed to find its audience initially. It was later discovered on video and enjoys a massive cult following to this day. The movie was directed by Ron Howard, fresh off the success of Cocoon. You know, the movie with Mahoney from Police Academy and that sass-talking driving Miss Daisy? The movie cost about $40 million to make and brought back $40 million. So there was no real profit and everybody just turned around and walked away from the possible franchise that it could have become. The basics of the plot involve the evil Queen Bavmorda, who wants to kill the newly born rightful heir to the throne, baby girl, Allura Dannon. Allura gets smuggled out of the castle before she gets whacked and ends up in the hands of the dwarf named Willow, and he feels a need to protect the girl. Mass adventures ensue as Willow meets Mad Mardigan, the greatest swordsman that ever lived, and he reluctantly joins Willow on his mental quest to take down Bavmorda and save the entire kingdom.
Okay, so the first game we're going to play is Willow, the computer game, and we're going to be playing that on the Commodore Amiga. So let's get a little perspective on when this game came out and jump back to 1988.
1988 was the year Tim Burton's full freakiness was unleashed onto the world in the form of Beetlejuice, and made me never want to run into Michael Keaton in a dark alley. Kokomo was released by the geriatric Beach Boys and ended up being even more popular than the film it was written for. I chalk up the success to Uncle Jesse on the bongo drums. And the Golden Girls was in its prime on TV, and Dorothy taught me that brutal honesty is sometimes the only way to survive in life.
Why don't I just wear a sign that says too ugly to live?
But what we're here for is the first Willow game, and that was released on all major home computer formats by Mindscape, just as the movie hit the cinemas. This game is a combination of unique and traditional. Unique in its storytelling and traditional in the fact that it's made up of lots of mini-games from major scenes in the movie. I've chosen the Amiga version to play here because I feel it's the best of all the home computer versions. Although having said that, that's not saying much.
Okay, so as soon as this game loads up, you're going to be greeted with this long scrolling intro thing, which when I first played this game I let it run and I was like, what is going on? It's telling me the whole movie and it's taking a really long time until I realized you can actually just scroll up and down in the actual intro, and like you can move it up and down and go straight to like the end and read the whole movie and kind of ruin the whole story for yourself. It's a bizarre approach. Also, the words that are like highlighted in black are the actual levels of the game. So how it works is you can jump to wherever you want to in the game and just play a level. Now this for me is like the biggest problem with this game, is that you can just jump straight to the end right now. You can just scroll down and start right at the end and see the end and finish it. And there's no consequences. There's no consequences for dying in this game. There's no progression because you can just go anywhere you want and just die as many times as you like. The only consequences for dying is the really obnoxious loading times.
The game consists of 5 levels, which include the escape from Nockmaar Dungeons, the Nockmaar Woods, the Shield Sleigh Ride from Hell, Mad Mardigan's Slice and Dice with Kale, and Willow's spazzy attempts to transform Rizal back into a human for a Bavmorda smackdown. I do like the variety of gameplay approaches for each level, but unfortunately the execution leaves much to be desired.
Okay, so the graphics are pretty mediocre, I mean especially for an Amiga game at this time. The animation on a whole is pretty horrendous. The Ice Caves part is like the only bit of animation that is pretty decent. What is kind of annoying for me when playing this game, this is only if you're a fan of the movie. If you've never seen the movie, it won't make any difference. But they have these digitized pictures which they put up before each level, and the pictures are taken completely out of context with the level that they kind of show. You know, so it's like it has the Knockmar Woods, which is like right near the beginning of the movie, and the digitized picture that they show is Willow running across the bridge in like a scene that's way later in the movie. So it kind of like throws you for a loop. You think you're going to be playing that level and you're like, what is going on? If you know the movie, it's kind of weird.
Gameplay, unfortunately, is where this game just crumbles to ashes. Almost every level besides Mad Mardigan's fight is just a maze where you have no idea where to go, and one wrong move and you're dead. Then cue the 20,000 hour loading sequence to try it all over again. In the dungeon you run and hope you don't hit a dead end, or else this happens. The woods, you run and hope you don't run into a dead end, or else this happens. The ice caves, you slide and hope you don't hit a dead end, or else this happens. The spellcasting part, you randomly choose stuff and hope you don't screw up, or else this happens. And don't even get me started on the sluggish controls of Mad Mardigan's Kale fight sequence.
Okay, so the only saving grace in this game is the music. No. Nah. I'm lying. At least I got the themes from the movie right. There's a lot of the themes, all the character themes are in here, which is kind of cool. Unfortunately, they didn't even put any attempt into converting this music. It's basically the MIDI music from the PC version just being ported straight across. It's super embarrassing for an Amiga game. The Amiga has a vastly superior sound chip, especially at this time. It's freaking excellent, it's one of the best, and this music is pitiful. It's like first generation NES garbage. It's just horrible. And sound effects, yeah, they're pretty much non-existent. The programmers are like, sound effects in a game? Who needs those? Pah.
Okay, so my overall thoughts on Willow the computer game? Well, there are no positives, unfortunately I'm just gonna have to go straight to the negatives. The graphics are average at best, with some of the poorest animation I've ever seen in a game. The music is a joke for an Amiga game, and doesn't even play during gameplay, because that would be asking too much, wouldn't it? Gameplay is a tragic mess, which involves constantly dying and hoping you randomly choose the right path next time. There are no positives for this game that I can recommend. It's just a massive mess, and compared to the other versions we're about to look at, it's really quite embarrassing. Overall, avoid this version at all costs.
And now that we got that hellspawn of a game out of the way, we're going to have a look at the two awesome games made by Capcom, and they came out in
1989 saw the release of the Sega Mega Drive, and my dreams of owning all the Sega arcade games I loved was finally coming true. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was released in the cinema, and taught me that if I'm going to take a flight on a German Zeppelin, I better make damn sure I have a ticket.
No ticket.
And the New Kids on the Block release, Hanging Tough, which taught me how hard life was on the street for a bunch of millionaire 20-somethings. But most importantly, we saw the release of not one but two Willow games from the legendary Capcom, both completely different games. First was a side-scrolling platform action fest for the arcades, and next was a Zelda-inspired action RPG for the NES. So let's take a look at the arcade game first.
Okay, so this version of Willow follows the movie pretty closely. It adds little things here and there, but it's pretty accurate. As soon as you leave the village in this game, right at the beginning here, it gives you this false sense of security. The first level is a total breeze. The boss is super easy to kill, and you're like, oh, this is gonna be a fun light adventure game. But no, this game gets real tough. The difficulty jumps like 200% by the second level. So it just reminds you of how hard these old school arcade games really were.
The game has 6 stages, from the crossroads where you meet Mad Mardigan to the snow-capped peaks of Sorcerer's Camp, all the way to Bab Morda's Castle of Doom. The variety of the stages is quite diverse, and they even add the wagon fight and the shield ride sequence from the movie.
What struck me this time about playing this game is how closely it looks like Ghouls and Ghosts. I know that game was also made by Capcom, but it really has the same kind of graphic style and feel. Even the extreme difficulty is there, so if you like that game, you're gonna like this. It's the graphics and the animation are just excellent. It's so colorful, animated really, really well. it's just like an excellent example of how cool 16-bit sprite-based graphics can look.
The gameplay falls into the platform genre, and depending on which character you're playing, it's either run and gun or hack and slash. Most of the levels alternate between you controlling Willow, who uses long-range magic attacks, and Madmartigan, who uses a sword for close quarters death dealing. Everything that is killed in the game drops money, which can be used to buy items in the shop to upgrade either character, and these upgrades stay with you the whole game, RPG style.
Okay, so this game is pretty damn hard. If I can give you any basic tip about it, I would say definitely upgrade Willow and Madmartigan's main weapons ASAP. Make that your top priority. You're also gonna have to, because like, I mean, some of the later bosses, they are super difficult, and if you're not up to snuff, you're toast. And another thing also, you're gonna have to kind of play the game and figure out where the bosses are gonna show up, because there's usually like a little shop right before a boss or close to a boss, and choosing the right layout of stuff to buy to face that boss is vitally important as well. My overall suggestion for fighting bosses is definitely buy the protection rings. You can buy one to three. It like protects you from 1 to 3 hits depending on like how much money you got. Those are pretty vital. Some of the bosses are really tough and you're gonna need those.
The music is your typical arcade fare of the time. It's nothing memorable at all, and there isn't a single tune that stuck with me after finishing the game. It's a pity they didn't do some variations on the movie soundtrack, because that had a fantastic score. Overall though, what do I think of Willow the arcade game? The positives are, the graphics are excellent with beautiful backgrounds and really colourful animation. Top-notch stuff. The music is average, nothing memorable at all, but the sound effects are really good. Great variety in the levels, especially as it switches between characters, which gives it some nice diversity. The negatives are, the game is mega difficult and is going to be a tough play for newbies, or even veterans for that matter. Overall though, I would say this version of Willow is not only an excellent arcade game, but it's by far my favourite of the 3 games based on this movie.
Okay, as soon as this game starts, it has this cool intro sequence, and you're watching it and you're like, wait a minute, they didn't explain any of this in the movie. What is this? Who made this up? And this is based purely on conjecture on my part. I have no idea whether this is true or not, but it just gives you the feeling that, you know, maybe this was a game that was in development by Capcom, this Zelda-esque RPG that they were going to release, and it was probably going to be coming out pretty soon, and they got the Willow license, and they were like, yeah, hey, instead of just making 1 game with this license, why don't we just put out 2? The arcade game's really well underway. Let's put out an NES game. Hey, what about that Zelda-esque thing you guys have been working on? It seems like they've taken a game that was like 80% made, and they've kind of just altered it, put in like some characters from Willow and some assets here and there, and they've kind of converted it. That's what it seems like to me. Having said all that, this game still is a pretty good Willow game.
So this game is an action RPG taking its cues massively from The Legend of Zelda, with real-time battles, side quests, and leveling up in the more traditional RPG style. It follows the plot of the movie, but the plot almost seems like a side quest to all the other fun adventuring that this Willow game has to offer.
The graphics overall are pretty good. There's a nice bit of variety, the villages, the outskirts, everything. The animation is also pretty decent. The only issue I have is the kind of lack of color. It's very washed out, but I think that's more of a limitation of the NES hardware than anything else.
Gameplay is of the pure hack and slash RPG variety with fast, quick encounters. Willow acquires a sword and shield at certain points in the game, and those are his main attacks and defense. He also has magic in a limited form. Kill stuff, level up, complete side quests for villagers are the main tropes, and characters from the movies are encountered along the way, and are a gentle reminder that you are still playing a Willow game and not just a repurposed RPG.
Yeah, so I grew up with a Commodore 64, and that has an absolutely amazing sound chip for an 8-bit system. Actually, the music in that probably trumps most 16-bit consoles as well, in my opinion. That's how good it is. But, you know, like, every time I used to put on, like, a NES game, I was just kind of reminded of how good that sound chip really was. Now, I'm not saying the music in Willow is bad. It's your usual NES ditties, you know. It complements the scenarios pretty well. It works for this game. It's decent. There's no themes from the movie, unfortunately.
So, my overall thoughts on Willow for the NES? The positives are, the graphics are good and it's animated pretty well. The locations are pretty diverse the further you get into the game and have a lot of variety. The quests are fun, cliche but fun, and are enjoyable to complete. The battle sequences play well, and a combo of hack and slash, magic and dodging, it's quite enjoyable. The negatives are, the music is pretty forgettable and there's no Willow themes anywhere. If you're a fan of the movie, it's very light on the main plot and characters. It's all there, at least, but it's buried very deep. Overall though, a pretty good action RPG for the NES. If you like this style of game, you're going to find a lot of fun here, and even casuals should enjoy playing this RPG-like game.
Okay, so this is the part of the show where we look at some of the merchandising and spin-off stuff from Willow, and before we go any further, we gotta just talk about Willow, the actual movie, that beautiful beast. This movie is absolutely fantastic.
It was a different time. It was a time of destiny. A time when a child could tip the balance between good and evil.
This is what I call Lucasfilm's golden period. This is when they could just not make any bad movies. Everything they brought out was just fantastic. And yes, I know what you're gonna say. What about Howard the Duck? Yeah, well, Howard the Duck is such a bad movie that it's actually good. I wouldn't recommend you watch it, but for me it's a so bad it's good movie, so I don't count that. So this is long before they made those Star Wars prequel movies, which I'm not even going to get into because I'll probably smash the camera right now. But so Willow is a fantastic fantasy movie. It stars the Leprechaun from the Leprechaun movies. It's got the Iceman from Top Gun, and it's even got that weird cowboy dude from Superman 3, which is a rubbish movie, but whatever. And so this is an excellent fantasy adventure. It is fun, it's got great comedy, great action, excellent effects for the time. It's just an all-round, just awesome movie.
A time for an unlikely hero named Willow.
Tell her I'm not gonna let anything happen to the baby.
You gotta give that baby to somebody.
I'm somebody.
A time of scoundrels.
What goes on here?
Uh-oh.
And a time of rebels.
You are great.
It's my favorite fantasy movie of all time. It even trumps the Lord of the Rings trilogy for me. I know, blasphemy, blasphemy. But I'm not saying the Lord of the Rings trilogy are terrible or anything. They are excellent. But for me, Willow as a fantasy movie just hits all the right marks perfectly. And if you've never seen this movie, I highly recommend you go check it out. It's available on Blu-ray and DVD. You can download it, whatever. Definitely check Willow out. Yeah, so George Lucas always intended Willow to be a series, a new franchise. It didn't perform that well on initial release, unfortunately. It's a cult classic now, and so they never got to make any more movies, which is unfortunate. But George Lucas teamed up with Chris Claremont. If you don't know who he is, he's a comic book writer, and he wrote the Marvel Dark Phoenix saga, which is the death of Jean Grey. So, and many other stuff. So if you're interested to check out his other things, he's got a massive body of work, excellent stuff. So George Lucas and Chris Claremont wrote 3 novels, these ones here, and they kind of take the story further. It's basically the main character that I know of is Laura Dannon. It's when she's grown up and she's like a warrior, and it goes on her adventures. So I had a friend, I've never actually read these. I have a friend who's a massive into fantasy books and stuff like that, and he actually read those, the whole series, and he said they were excellent, and he's read 1,000,000 fantasy books, so I have to take his word for it. So if you want to continue the adventures of Willow, you can check out those 3 books. And so the last of the Willow merchandise I want to talk about is this mini-series put out by Marvel. It's a comic book series, it's a 3-parter. It's Marvel obviously did a lot of these kind of movie adaptations back in the day. This one is pretty cool.
What I like about these old movie adaptations in comic book form is that they clearly had their script of the movie when they were making these comic books, because the movie hadn't come out yet. They timed them to come out exactly when the movie came out. So they often contain the scenes from the movie that aren't actually in the movie, because when they get to the editing process they delete stuff out. And this comic book is a great example of that. There's a couple little things here and there. If you watch the Blu-ray version of Willow, you'll see like one of the deleted scenes is this giant fish. It's like attacks Willow when he's crossing the lake to find Rizal. Anyway, so this comic book has that whole scene in it, and it's just part of the story because they never knew it was going to be cut out. So that's just like a perfect example of why these comic books are actually pretty important. Yeah, you should definitely check it out. It's a cool little series, 3 parts. They also collected it into a graphic novel form, so if you want to just see it in one big bunch, that's the way to go. Yeah, so what are my overall impressions of the Willow games? Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? The first game made by Mindscape for all the PC formats at the time. Terrible game. Avoid it at all costs. It's just a nightmare. Even if you like the movie, you're not going to find any love here. The next 2 made by Capcom are really good. The arcade game is fantastic. It's by far the best of the bunch. The NES RPG, Action RPG Fest, that is Willow on the NES there, that is quite good also. It strays a little bit from the actual movie. It's loosely based on it. It's still quite cool though, if you like that kind of game. So overall though, it's a pretty decent series. Okay, so thanks for joining me, Bastich B at 64K. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Let's Play a Series. Let me know in the comments. If you could like and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. I'll see you next time. Cut to credits.